All right, you have found Authentic Business Adventures, the business program that brings you the struggles, stories, and triumphant successes of business owners across the land, coming to you remotely because that's how we roll in this COVID world. But I'm excited because we have Susan Marshall today. Susan is the founder of the Backbone Institute, as well as the author of 4 books. So if anything makes you feel lazy, that should do it. But I'm excited to hear from Susan. So Susan, let's start with, what is the Backbone Institute?
Hi, James. Thanks for having me on. Backbone Institute is a private practice, essentially, dedicated to the 3 elements of Backbone, which are competence, confidence, and risk-taking. And if you think of those 3 elements, they really form a learning pattern or a learning system, if you will. If we can set a goal, if we don't set a goal, we got nowhere to go, right? But once you set a goal, that kind of gives you your focus. Then you back up from that and say, what do I need to get better at in order to elevate my confidence to go achieve that? So personal, professional entrepreneurs are fabulous, as you know yourself, for having all kinds of energy that sometimes isn't quite channeled toward a particular goal. So competence, confidence, risk-taking. When I started speaking on this, 25 years or so ago, I used to ask the audience, of those 3 elements, competence, confidence, and risk-taking, which one do you think is most missing? People would say very, very early on it was competence. A lot of people are out there doing stuff, they don't know what they're doing. Then it became risk-taking. In fact, I was at an IT conference years ago and said, competence, confidence, risk-taking. Guy pulled me aside at the break and he goes, you can't say that word.
Can't say what word?
Which word? He said, risk.
What?
Well, exactly. I said, well, why not? He said, it scares people. I'm like,
kind of the point, right?
Kind of the point, exactly right, at an IT conference. So anyway, and more recently, James, it's been confidence.
All right.
I think are very confused about what business success is, what it means, what leadership is all about. So I get a lot of questions on that. And while people kind of stand up strong and, say all these wonderful things, you can tell just by looking at some people that the confidence is really not there.
Common, extremely common, to a fault.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of given me a new wrinkle to think about. How do we help people shut out the noise, focus on what they are gifted with? StrengthsFinders is one of my favorite tools. And really work to develop that and worry less about what people sometimes tell them they should or could be doing.
Sure. Yeah, it's interesting you say that. I just had a conversation with one of my employees where she's training a new employee. And I'm like, this doesn't seem confident. And if the new employee comes and they don't see the confidence in the training and the curriculum and all that kind of stuff, they're going to get scared away because they're going to be like, you're an idiot. Right? Just, you don't seem intelligent. You seem like you don't know what's going on. You're flying by the seat of your pants. And I think a lot of people got away with that for a long time, but I don't know if that's
so walk fast, talk fast, and don't, just speed through and leave them in your wake going,
right.
What was that? What just happened?
Right. We got some politicians that are good at that. But,
oh, please don't get me started.
No, we don't have to go down that road. But it's interesting how you could argue if you have more confidence than competence, you could be more successful than someone that has the flip side of that, right?
Well, and I think that's a real trap. And actually have spent a lot of time working with people, because if you have more confidence than competence, is it confidence or is it braggadocio? Are you trying to look like something you are not? If you really at base level know what you're doing. I mean, it's a frightening prospect, but I think a lot of people do.
I would argue that there's a lot of people in sales positions that have exactly that, right? To be in sales at all, as successful, you have to have confidence.
True.
And I can tell you from shopping for a car, those salespeople have no idea what they're selling. No clue. Outside of color, maybe.
Wow. Well, I haven't shopped for a car in a while, but given that, I'm not sure I'm going to. Well, a lot of people are shopping online.
Absolutely. Yeah, I would say it's not exclusive to car shopping. It's just anything. I mean, you go into a retail store to buy a TV and you're like, hey, does this TV do whatever compared to this TV? And they start reading the box. Like, well,
Well,
I can read. I don't I don't need
you know what's
genius.
interesting about that, though, is you think about how we've morphed from going to talk with someone who supposedly knows a product to looking online and going through all the specs and having some idea and reading the blogs and all that kind of thing. So the
Mhm.
whole shopping experience, I think, is different. Um,
It's evolving, that's for sure.
yeah, and I, you know, you think about AI and you think about Elon Musk, who's going to implant us all with chips. No worries, he'll have confidence built in there. So
Sure.
it's a
Huh.
different world, and I think that's partly why I'm seeing a lot of people today a little scrambled. What should I
All
pay
right.
attention to? What should I not? What do I need to get good at? What do I not need not to worry about?
Mm-hmm.
And all of that has an impact on confidence.
I, from my experience, and I guess you're Midwest just like I am,
Yep.
a lot of people here are terribly slow at making decisions. So I guess that leads to at least me viewing them as lacking confidence. I don't know
Yep.
if that's the case or not, or if they're, I don't know why. I don't know
Well,
why.
it's interesting you say that because I've done a lot of work with East Coast people whom I absolutely love. New Yorkers are my all-time favorite.
Love it.
And New Jersey, you don't have to guess. They're going to tell you like it is. If it hurts your
Yes.
feelings, so sad, too bad.
Best. Love it.
And
Mm-hmm.
I think here, yes, in the Midwest, we suffer from Midwest nice. We don't want to
That's
hurt.
nice. I don't want to hurt your feelings.
Yeah, so we'll edit what we're going to say, and I mean, all of that, people can sense the hesitation, and they can sense that the word authentic comes from this, you're not being real with me.
Mm-hmm.
And our brains are constantly trying to sort out what's going to hurt, what's not, what's going to help, what's not. And then we get all tangled up, and that's where confidence goes right down the
Sure.
street.
Yeah, it's interesting. Just I guess you're talking about the word confidence, man. I see a challenge in some of the potential employees that I was looking at
Yeah.
or considering hiring, where their resume seemed cool, but when you talk to them, they couldn't form a sentence or just
Mhm.
scared, I guess. And my main business, the call answering service, we talk to people,
Yeah.
so we need the confidence.
Yeah.
It's a must-have. I would argue it's a must-have for any business, but I imagine there's some programmers out there staring at the keyboard that are doing just fine without it.
I think that's true. And you know, and then you get into the whole introvert versus extrovert argument.
Mm-hmm.
Extroverted and therefore, but confidence is not about verbal or physical demonstration.
Not exclusively, no. No, I think that's a part of it, right? Or it
Certainly,
could be a part of it, depending upon the situation.
exactly correct. But I know some leaders that I know are extraordinarily introverted, but powerful when they speak. People are like, "Wow, that made sense." So
So,
it's really knowing yourself, knowing your role, knowing what you're trying to accomplish, and that's the competence piece that, at least in my mind, has to precede confidence.
all right, that's fair. I'm thinking of John F. Kennedy when he said we're going to go to the moon. He
Right.
had confidence in that, but he didn't know anything about going to the moon.
Oh, and people are like, "What?"
Yeah, wait, even the scientists are like, what are we doing?
Well, see, and that's the risk element, right? So you put it out there and you say, okay, that's an outrageous thing on its face.
Mm-hmm.
However, if we're going to take that seriously as a mission that this president in this country wants to do, what do we need to get good at? What do we need
Right?
to figure out to elevate our confidence to take the next step and the next step and the next step? Before you know it, we're planting a flag on the moon.
Sure, right? It worked out
It did.
late, but it's all good.
Right.
So, do you train people individually, or do you present to them as groups, or how do you resolve this confidence and competence issue?
Both and.
Okay.
Depending on, excuse me, I started out, excuse me, doing a lot of independent coaching.
Mm-hmm.
Your point earlier, James, I got really kind of frustrated with that because people were leaning on me to help them get better when it is,
Sure.
as you know, it's not the coach's job.
Right. I bought a treadmill. How come I didn't lose weight?
Right. Or you look at my dumbbells over here. Yeah, exactly right.
Right.
And in fact, my favorite story of executive coaching was a bunch of years ago. I walked into a guy's office and you could tell he had pictures of sailboats and, you know, all of his vacation spots and just trappings everywhere about his success and his wealth and his power. So I walk into his office and I don't even know how he heard about me. And I'm sitting across the table from his desk, or across the desk from him. And he points his finger at me. He says, "You know what? You know how I'm going to know you're any good?" Like, nope. He said, "If you can fix me."
Oh.
And I chuckled a little bit and I thought, you know what, be careful, just because the guy obviously has power. I said, no, that's the exact backwards of this equation. My job is to help you do what you want to do. I don't fix anybody.
Right.
And that was the end of the conversation. And I never did work with him. So it was
Really?
really.
Wow. That's
It was good.
it's the illusion of control.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Interesting. Huh? Like was on?
So, you know, from your own business coaching, sometimes there's a fine line between coaching and therapy.
Right.
And a lot of people, especially in the last 5 years, I'm going to say, are coming in for therapeutic work
Mm-hmm.
rather than just kind of straight up coaching. So I'm very, very careful to say up front, look, some of these things that we'll be talking about, they're very personal. This is all confidential. However, if there is a need you have that exceeds business coaching, I'm happy to refer you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Probably 25 to 30% of the people that I begin working with, I refer.
Wow, that's a big percentage.
Big number.
But
Big number.
it's not out of the question. I understand what you're saying. That makes sense.
Well, and I think because we now live in a much more open kind of environment where, you know, you open your kimono and you're authentic and you just kind of
Sure.
burp it all out.
That's that's fair. That's
Well,
fair.
and we're encouraged to do that. And then without stepping back and saying, you know what, context matters. What am I going to share in this context that is going to have ramifications for the organization, perhaps my leadership team, and certainly for anybody who's listening to me with a competitive ear?
That's fair. I guess my experience has been there have been some clients that I've had to stop working with simply because they were enjoying being broken or enjoying having their problem. Like that was their mindset was I'm alive because I have problems, which to a point is realistic, but they weren't interested in resolving those problems to get a higher quality of problem.
Amen.
So they're just complacent in their pain.
Yes. And in fact, I was working in the New York City Leadership Academy many moons ago, and Bob Knowling was at the time the CEO of the Academy. The Academy was formed by Mike Bloomberg, who was the mayor at the time, Jack Welch, Noel Tishy, Carolyn Kennedy, Dick Parsons of Mayo. So a lot of really important people. But we would get around our planning meetings anytime we were going to welcome a new cohort. And one of the things that Knowling used to say is, you know, sometimes we find the smartest people we know, we put them all together in a room, and then we sit down and we enjoy our problems. Right. And it's true.
True, very true.
You know, we have these wonderful conversations and we leave feeling ever so smart and with all this wonderful company. We haven't said a thing. What are we doing?
You could argue that's almost every board meeting that's ever happened.
Precisely.
Yeah. That's interesting. That's a list of who's who, huh? Back in the day.
Oh, it was amazing. And talk about confidence. Once I had that lens in place as I was beginning to do the research for my work, it's like, it is amazing how people can appear to be confident, but scratch the surface or ask a challenging question. Whoopsies. Goes pretty quickly sometimes.
Sure. Interesting. So what got you into this whole coaching realm?
I led a turnaround in the mid 90s of a privately held marketing division of a privately held marketing firm, direct marketing, and the other side of the business was point of purchase display type stuff. And one of the things that when I stepped into the role, I had just finished work on an MBA degree. So of course, everybody knows once you have an MBA, you're really, really smart.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I get the tap on the
shoulder. Follow, rose petals go. Yeah.
I know. I got the tap on the shoulder. Hey, do you want to step into this role? It wasn't that simple or that clean. It never is. But the woman who had been brought in after the figurehead of the division had died at an early age came from the East Coast, my favorite people, but she knew direct marketing in a very different way. She was with subscription marketing and financial services type stuff. Our business was largely automotive and loyalty programs, think hotel programs, think frequent flyer stuff. So it was a mismatch from the get-go, and really, really uncomfortable. After a year in, she was just beside herself, had moved her family from the East Coast to Wisconsin. They didn't like being here. They hated the weather, all that kind of stuff. It's not that different from the East Coast. Anyway, within a year, she was not doing well. I had just finished the MBA, so I got the, you want to take this over. At the time, we were losing about $2.5 million on a $16 million business. So it was bad. Yeah, it was really bad. And so I worked through we had maybe 40 people in the division. My first question to everybody in the division was, what were you hired to do? And given what you know about this business and our clients, what should you be doing? Based on that input and that feedback, we culled out people who shouldn't be there at all. We kind of moved things around, and we completely restructured the business and client teams versus functional departments.
All right.
It was unique to the company itself. It was not well received, I will say that, by my counterparts in the other division. I actually wrote about this in How to Grow a Backbone. But we were successful in turning it around, sustained it for a year. And I thought, you know what, this was kind of cool. And I wonder if I could help other companies do similar kinds of things. So I went off on my own. I think probably, 18 months later, I'm like, man, I got to get a job. This is not working the way I expected. Went to work for Hewitt Associates, which is a global HR consulting firm in Lincolnshire, Illinois. They wanted to build a leadership practice. And of course, that had been a lot of this research I had done, the writing I had done, et cetera. So I was there, more PhDs per capita than I had ever seen in my life in any organization whatsoever. I was completely intimidated. This is not my deal. So I think I was there maybe 9 months. And but really integrating all of the experiences I had and the things that I had worked on and listened to people say they wanted to do, but couldn't quite figure out how. Competence, confidence, risk-taking. We don't know what we're talking about. We sound really good. Mm-hmm. Go and you sell something to a client in that environment, you come back and you sit around a conference room table and look at each other and go, ruh-roh. I think there's a lot of that in business. So that's what triggered the interest, and I just kept working with different people and paying attention, keeping notes,
All right.
As we go.
How did you end up getting that first job then to do a turnaround of that scale?
Yeah,
$2.5 million on a $16 million company. You had to have some credentials other than I just graduated, or?
Oh, absolutely. And I had been with the company for 7.5 years.
With that same company?
With that same company.
Oh, so wow. Okay.
I knew the business. I knew the clients. I knew some of the supplier relationships we had were really not appropriate for the business. Again, the woman who had taken it over was focused on a very different adaptation, if you will, of direct marketing. It really didn't make sense for us. People throughout the division were confused and really didn't know how to adapt. So one of the things that we did that was a ton of fun that I highly recommend people who are struggling now with, gosh, the business has changed, our tools have changed. We walked through about a 9-month process with as many people in the division as we could gather each of our times. And we literally process mapped the business. Mm-hmm. Where does an order come from? If it comes from a sales exec, who touches it next? For how long? What do they do? Where does it go next? What do they do? All the way through understanding the challenge, to designing the program, to actually creating the deliverables of the program, getting it to the client, and then processing the feedback. So we learned a ton.
All right. So yeah, my rule is systematize everything.
Yeah.
So that's crazy to think that a business of that scale doing that kind of revenue didn't have that already.
Well, because the guy who ran it for many years was a natural sales guy.
Okay.
Loved to be around him. He had relationships and connections with the Hyatt brothers and with the Marriott family. And so some of those big, big clients that none of the rest of us had. And of course, when he passed, that top level link was severed. There had been other relationships built, obviously, through those clients. But it was really far more dependent on the organization rather than the individual to make the company continue. So I think that's what got us in trouble, frankly.
All right. So how did you get picked out of that crowd? Because there had to be a bunch of people that were vying for the position of fixing this. Were you the one that just said, hey, this is broken? So they're like, here you go?
Had been saying that, and we had been in the process of kind of looking at, was there a different way to structure it? It was one of several, yes, to your point. The appointment was controversial in the sense that a woman who was acknowledged as a tremendously intelligent, brilliant strategist wanted the role and didn't get it.
Oh.
So that was, I could tell lots of horror stories about that, but won't.
Sure.
But that's natural, right? And then there was another guy that the woman before me had brought from New York who also felt like he should have gotten the job, even though he had been with the company for, I don't know, 10 months, maybe 10 or 11 months. So there's a lot of human dynamics that go into any of that kind of thing.
Oh, yeah.
That intrigued me every bit as much as the business itself.
Sure. That makes sense. That's fair. So let's downshift and talk about your books.
Yes.
You got 4 books out, published.
Published.
And when was the first time that you wrote your first book? And why don't you just tell us what it is, what it's about, all that jazz?
Yes. Well, the first published book is called How to Grow a Backbone, 10 Strategies for Gaining Power and Influence at Work. And it was based on this competence, risk-taking. That actually was published in 2000, so it's 20 years old.
Wow.
Yeah, it is making somewhat of a resurgence at this moment.
All right.
As people are looking at, power and influence. Yeah, how do I do that? This crazy world. Prior to that, I've been writing since I was a kid. It has literally been my way to keep my sanity. I'm the second of 6.
Sure.
Railroad tracks to the river, and I would just write and about anything. So I enjoyed words. I noticed one of the women you had on was a linguist.
Yeah.
S.I. Hayakawa was the linguist I absolutely revered in high school journalism class. Loved the guy, loved words, loved the meaning of words, Latin roots, and all that kind of stuff. So anyway, I'm kind of a geek in that sense. So I've been writing and writing. Well, I was a single mom also for a lot of years. I had 2 daughters, and our means of communication, because I was working, traveling, and going to school nights, was to write each other notes, and we'd put them on the kitchen table.
Mm-hmm.
No, Mom, I'm in bed, but I'm studying, come down and kiss goodnight, whatever. So the first book I put together was called Letters in the Kitchen.
Oh, interesting.
All of the parents who wonder what their kids are thinking about when they're at work or they're traveling. Well, I had all of this evidence. And I thought, man, this is pretty cool. Yeah, well, publishers didn't think so. I was sending it out, and an agent called me from New York and said, so the only people interested in this kind of book are the authors. I'm like, ooh.
Oh, that's a dagger to the heart.
We like your writing style. If you would consider writing a business-oriented book, we'd look at it. So I sent them 3 titles: How to Grow a Backbone, The Corporate Trust, A Message for CEOs, and I forget what the third one was. Well, they loved the title, How to Grow a Backbone. And they said, cool, what's it about? I'm like, I don't know yet. So that was an education. They sent me their template to create a book proposal and all this kind of stuff, which was a giant research project. What are similar books? Where have they been published? Who are the publishers? What's the sell price? Right? Well, I'm like, I hate this. I'm not a data queen by any stretch of the imagination. But nonetheless, I learned a ton. Wrote the book. They copied it and sent it to 8 different publishers. NTC Books in Chicago had a publicist who also loved the title. Cool. So NTC picked it up. I got yes, I did get I got a small, what's it called when you write it? Advance.
Okay.
Book. Because I was working with an agent, the agent got 15% on that right off the top.
Ouch. Okay.
So anyway, that was interesting. When the book came out, I was getting divorced. So felt like the expert in precisely nothing, which was too bad. But the second book then was called Life, Be In It. That one came out in 2012 because I wanted to get back in the market as an author to work on the Backbone Guide series. We had titles for young professionals, geeks, nonprofit leaders, parents, and educators. So we put it up on the website. I think it probably still is up on the website. And I was starting a little survey. Which of these titles would you be most interested in reading next? And that was, as you can imagine, scattered across all the titles. So I had begun research on the geek book, being researchers, scientists, IT people. And the working title was Leveraging Your Genius, a Backbone Guide for Geeks.
Oh.
What I began to realize, and I talked with probably 45 or 50 different geeks from all different industries, and I began to realize that their culture was not one of sharing. Their culture was one of being the expert.
Interesting.
So
okay.
for them to leverage their genius meant to dissipate their power. I had no idea.
Oh, yeah. I can tell you from working with IT people that they are very happy to keep their power in their power. Oh, yeah.
So I had this very altruistic idea in mind, right? Well, forget that. What a naive. So that book went by the wayside, and then picked up in 2014, of Beauty and Substance, a Backbone Guide for Women was published. Those two books, let's back up. How to Grow a Backbone, NTC Contemporary Books was bought by McGraw-Hill.
Oh, okay.
That's the big house. I had sent them my Backbone Guide series proposal, and they said, yeah, you know what? You really didn't sell much of that first book. Yeah, we're not interested. Like, what? Come on, man. So then there's a local publisher here, Kira Henschel, Henschel House Books.
I've heard of Henschel House, sure.
Yep. So she published Life Be in It. She also published the Backbone Guide for Women, and she became a friend of mine. As I was living this experience with mom and dad, so the subject of the fourth book, I was telling her just things. I don't know what to do with this attorney. I'm 1,900 miles away. I have to talk to doctors. There are HIPAA laws. There's all this stuff. She said, you know, you really need to write a book about this. I'm like, what? And I kept saying to her, Kira, I don't know who I'm writing to, and I don't know what I'm saying. I'm not an expert in anything. I'm simply stumbling through this whole thing. Well, she continued to encourage me to do it, and I thought, after mom's been gone 3 years now, dad's gone 4. But in the aftermath, I thought, you know what? I think the contribution I want to make is to write as clearly and as candidly as I can about what became kind of an emotional stew. 5 siblings. Why did you do this? Why did you not do that? Doctors, attorneys, HIPAA laws, caregivers, friends, neighbors, the whole bit. So that's what I did. It's called Mom's Gone Missing.
All right.
When a parent's changing life upends yours. And the book literally opens with a phone call I got from a mother. He was calling from Colorado. I picked up my phone in Wisconsin. Mom was in Arizona. And he said to me, Mom's gone missing. Find her.
Oh.
What? That started it.
That is crazy. So I want to talk to you. I want to back up a step to the first book that you published. 20 years ago, self-publishing really wasn't a thing outside of going to a press and paying thousands of dollars to have them actually physically print your book.
Right.
Where now you can just throw it on Amazon or Ingram Spark, and it's out there to the world without you having to really invest thousands of dollars. So, I mean, you still have to have a product to sell, but it's way different to self-publish now, way easier than it was 20 years ago. So 20 years ago, to find a publisher was almost a have to kind of thing, right?
Well, it was. And so I had been, mind you, been writing since I was a kid. When I was probably 15 or 16, I promised my grandfather, who I absolutely revered, that someday I was going to write a book. And in my teenage mind, I thought, I'm going to be just like Danielle Steele. And I'm going to write novels, and they're going to be the same book over and over. I'm going to change the characters. I'm going to change the locations. Well, never in my wildest dreams did I expect I'd write any kind of business-related book. But knowing that I had this desire at some point in my life to write a book, at that time, to your point, it's a really good one, there was really nothing self-publishing like that was understandable or usable to just So then it meant you had to find representation. So I would go every year and I'd buy these big fat guides to literary agents. And I would pore over those things. What do they represent? And, you know, where are they? And what kind of success have they had? And all these profiles. And it's like, holy cow. But anyway, so, and then when I wrote Letters in the Kitchen, right, which is where this journey started, I would send it to one agent at a time, because that was publishing protocol at that time. You didn't dare send to more than one agent at once because that's
Really?
really bad form. Oh yeah. And so I'd send it out, and then 8 months, 9 months, sometimes 10 months later, I'd get a thanks, but no thanks. Do you remember? You're probably too young, but there was once upon a time a printing thing called mimeographing.
Oh yeah.
Oh, and you can just smell it was purple letters on this
Mm-hmm.
cheesy paper. I would get mimeograph things in the mail. Thanks, but no thanks. Form letter, 2 sentences. So I got sick of that. And so I think I sent it to 8 different agents at the time, which is where it landed with the guy in New York who called me and said, yeah, not interested in that book, but
All
what
right.
about you write?
Interesting. It's so funny because when I published my book, I have a sister that is published in Canada,
Oh,
and
cool.
she's like, "You got to find an agent," and she was telling me the sequence of events that has to happen, and I'm like, "No,
No.
I don't see that working out. I don't have the patience, and I
Right.
feel like that's an archaic system."
Right.
So
Yeah.
I'm self-publishing. I didn't even offer it to agents. Like I'm not going to wait for some random person
Right.
to maybe get back to me. I
Right.
get enough of that when I sell my other business stuff. I don't need to do it with a book that I'm going to make, 50 cents on or whatever.
Right. Well, and that's a big fallacy that people have. They're like, oh, write a book, you're going to become rich and famous. Yeah, it doesn't quite work that way either.
Not exactly. No, it's interesting when you think, like you see, I guess I know what you make in a book, right? Even if it's 70%, right?
Yeah.
70% of $9, you got to sell thousands of books to move the needle at all, to justify the expense
Right.
of time, editing, all that jazz, right?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of people that are just putting out junk. They're not spending much time writing, and they're not spending any money editing. So their cost of goods sold is pretty low, but I'm
Well,
not interested in putting out junk. So
just hit on something that I think is really tough right now because people who are interested in good, solid business experience and advice,
mhm.
how do you cull through hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of books that are put together on a very limited basis of experience and perspective that are thrown out there that by people who maybe write well and maybe don't?
Mhm.
So much out there, more every day, more every week, because the self-publishing has let anybody, who wants to hang a
Right.
shirt to do that.
Yeah, there's no filter, but you could
Right.
argue based on a lot of the books that I've read, the ones that are decades old that were super fancy awesome.
Yeah.
When I read them, I'm like, these are dry.
Right.
Some of them are repetitive to the point of being like, this is a waste of paper.
Right.
You still read them because you're like, oh, did you ever read whatever? And maybe you get a nugget out of them, so it's worth it. But I guess that was the point when I wrote my book, the Bold Business book, was to cram all those into one book and kind of be the Cliff's Notes version that actually had action steps, because I was so sick of people just giving ideals.
Right.
Or I guess a lot of times you run into business coaches that are like, oh, I'm super awesome business coach. Like, oh, that's great. Do you own a business? No.
Right.
Or they own their coaching practice. So I'm like, how do you have your ear to the railroad track kind of thing to know what's going on?
Yeah.
That you're going to tell your clients when your business experience is just reading a book.
Well, and I think that's a challenge for everybody today, right? We talk about quality and we have different ideas about what that means.
Sure.
And I think, well, there's a whole pipeline here, starting with, education and going on to higher ed, and then that transferring to business requirements, transferring to success and international business and all of that. It's a very complex environment that people are just trying to find a place. And
That's fair. That's fair.
it's,
I think in the case of education of any kind, right? Either book, school, whatever, people are looking for a way to justify throwing out their money. Whatever, maybe it's for a university where it's many thousands of dollars, or a book where it's $10 or something like that. They're trying to justify or find some way to sift through the piles of, I guess, competition, for lack of a better word, right? There's so many people and companies and things trying to get their attention. They got to figure out some way to sift through it, good or bad.
And so many tools associated with a particular coaching practice or assessment or what have you.
Mm-hmm.
I'm seeing more, and just actually had a conversation about this over the weekend with a colleague. I'm seeing more tools that are actually less effective.
Oh,
Because they're, click and answer, but there's not a lot of time or thought
sure.
put into some of these tools that are providing feedback to individuals who are genuinely interested or pressured by an organization to develop skill in order to grow, in order to be advanced, in order to take on more responsibility. So in my mind, there's kind of a mismatch there. If we have a tool that's quick and easy to use, how effective is it in getting at some true human development needs?
Sure. It's interesting. You raised such a funny point. I think of the story. I went to this Invest in Real Estate conference.
Oh, sure.
I don't know, 5 years ago or something like that. I asked a buddy to come with me, and he's like, nah, but leave your wallet at home. And I didn't know what he was talking about, because I'm like, hey, this is kind of cool, right? So I bring some friends, some other business owners and stuff like that. We go to this thing, and every presenter is trying to hustle something, right? And I'm like, all right, you got a crowd. I get it. No big thing. And there's some nuggets of information, so it's worth it. But there's this one woman that came out there, and she's trying to present or trying to sell this something that was like Disc or Strengths Finder, we're going to figure out exactly what your employees are kind of thing.
Right. The tool.
She was comparing it, I think she was comparing it to Disc. And I remember her standing up and being like, Disc has the 4 things, D, I, S, and C, and ours is 4 things, but you can see they're different. And she did this whole hand thing.
Oh, you got to be kidding me.
What is this? And still, to her credit, she gets done, jabbering, and people are lining up to throw their few $100 at her for her little whatever it is.
Yeah.
I'm like, wow.
I love that you said that. True confession time. I have been encouraged hundreds of times over 30 years to package something.
All right.
Worry less about the quality, worry less about the outcome, just package it and sell it. I'm gonna make a ton. I'm like, I am not put together in such a way that I am able to do that. I just can't.
I'm right there with you.
Yeah.
Right there with you. You could
But
totally come up with something that I just think of how many workout videos, right, people buy and they just sit on the shelf. Like that DVD could be blank and you would have no idea.
No idea. You bought the cover, you bought the description, and there
right.
it is.
I hope.
You're no different.
Yeah. Interesting. So how have book sales been?
This last one, they have been extraordinary, and there's a reason why. People who read the book find themselves. They find themselves in being scared, being uncertain, being angry, being resentful, having not clue on what to do next, feeling guilty because they're resentful, all of that stuff. It's a short book. But the feedback I've gotten has been extraordinarily emotional.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
That's cool. That's a good feeling.
It's very gratifying.
Sure.
It's very, very gratifying. And I think because I've written for so long, I have a natural ease with words and ability to write, and can find the words to convey a difficult emotional experience in such a way that people go, I get it, I've done that.
Sure. So let's shift into the coaching aspects of the confidence, the risk-taking, and the competence.
There you go.
I had to think for a second there.
You got it.
It's interesting. I want to shift back to what we were talking about before when we talk about the geeks.
Yeah.
It's interesting because it sounds like they had the competence, but they did not have the confidence, and it almost sounded like they didn't want it or didn't feel it was a problem.
I think that's true. And I think, again, going back to the introvert extrovert, a lot of very cranial people are very introverted. They don't want distraction. Distractions drain their energy. They just want to focus on doing what they're doing to the best that they can. And, it's like the old Dilbert cartoons, right? Geeks got a bad name. They really have a pizza under the door, leave them alone. They'll come out, in a week or 10 days or 6 months with the greatest thing ever. But don't worry about it. They'll be fine. And again, what I learned in talking with a bunch of them, and it wasn't just the IT people, it was a cancer researcher. It was an aerospace guy figuring out next, technology for the O-rings that failed in the Challenger thing. they don't, their motivation, the people that I spoke with, may be different now. This is dated information, but they were not interested in the least in sharing. And I often wonder when we're looking at research for new therapeutics, whether it's for COVID-19, whether it's for Alzheimer's, whether it's for a particular kind of cancer, that learning has not been shared effectively enough or quickly enough to bench practitioners. So put in the research labs and the towers and guided very carefully. Of course, you look at the financial structure, it's funded by government grants and foundations and all of that kind of stuff. Nobody wants to give that up. So that's kind of a cynical point of view, but again, the humanity.
Honest.
Well, and the humanity of it is like, look, if I can be king because I got this genome sequence, for example, why would I give that away?
Sure.
So I think we've got a lot of work to do in terms of knitting people together and effectiveness and experiences and all that kind of thing, but it's hard. And we see the world the way we see the world. Every human being has a different seat in life's arena. And I love to use the football analogy, right? Because I'm a football geek from the time I was a little kid. Flag gets thrown on Aaron Rodgers, for example, or Kenny Clark, and I'm off the couch. I'm like, what are you talking about? That's crazy. And then you see the infraction from the other side of the field, and you go, oh, okay, yeah, all right.
7 different camera angles, right?
Exactly. And I think about life that way. We see what we see. There's no way unless we put a pause on where we are and leave our vantage point and go to somebody else's, that we won't lose what we know. We won't lose what we see. We will have an expanded view if we go see from another person's perspective. That too is very difficult to do.
Right, because I imagine a lot of people have to admit that they're wrong about something or change positions.
Oh man!
Man, we talk about change. Whoa.
That's not very confident now, is it? And
well, you could argue, yeah, both directions, I suppose.
Well,
it's risk.
It's the ultimate in confidence, in my perspective. When I can see something I hadn't seen before, someone who either said it for the first time or has told me 14 times, when I can finally leave my little cocoon and go see what they see and go, oh, I get it. That expands both of our knowledge, and it strengthens a relationship. If I can say, gosh, I never saw that before. Thanks for showing me. I don't have to say I was wrong. If I was, okay. But those words, I was wrong, are so difficult for some people to say. I didn't see is easier. I didn't know that. I didn't have that perspective. Thanks for bringing this to the table. I think a lot about, to your point earlier, board meetings. All these really smart people around the table, we often gravitate toward the person who speaks most forcefully, perhaps the longest, sometimes the most frequently in a meeting. And people go, yeah, what he said, or yeah, what she said. Versus if we could get everybody to put their perspective on the table, think of that buffet of information we have that we can sort and piece together in different configurations to have a completely different understanding than any of our competitors. That's the kind of stuff that gets me excited.
Right. The challenge there, I guess from my point of view, is that when you take a group on a board, if someone doesn't have the confidence to tell me their opinion, to me, that tells me that they don't have confidence in their opinion. And though it may be that they're more introverted, but if you're more introverted, what are you doing on a board? Or are intimidated by another person in the room that they've told themselves a story that is more important than they are. Okay, that's fair, where they challenge confidence, but if they're telling themselves a story, that's totally fair. Totally fair. So they gotta get over that. Fix that. Take the risk, man.
Yeah, come on, go help them.
Yeah, well, realistically, because I've been on boards where you watch people just banter back and forth. I've been the leader on boards where I just had to watch people just let them get their steam out and all that kind of stuff. You just watch the ping pong conversation. Sometimes I've been part of the ping pong conversation. And I guess there have been times when I change my mind or you understand a perspective.
Right.
Other times you're just like, you know what? I'm going to agree with you just so that we can move on with our lives.
Right.
And I can see that decision haunting that that group for, it's usually not a life-threatening decision or anything like that.
Well, but sometimes it is. And I think about the classic Challenger O-ring story, right? Where they didn't debate when they should have, where there was information withheld for whatever reason, lack of confidence, introversion, whatever that might be. That's very real. And
so I know a very small amount about that story. I know tiny amount. So can you share just
yeah, well, the engineering on the O-ring failed.
Mm-hmm.
And even though they had tested it, and I don't not deeply involved in the details of it as well, but there was a meeting, probably several, in which the engineers and scientists were talking about this particular technology. They tested it. There was a guy, at least one guy in the room, who said, man, I thought to himself, I'm not comfortable with this. Never said anything.
Oh.
The O-rings failed, the Challenger exploded, we lost, teacher and astronauts.
Right.
That's on an extraordinary scale, right? But how many times have you been in meetings where people will look uncomfortable, like, nah, they're not so sure, and they don't know what to say or how? That comes back later, gosh, I wish we had that conversation.
When I was the leader of the board recently, I called people out that weren't talking.
Yeah.
And say, look, either you agree with us or you agree with someone here. I can't say us because there's disagreement.
Right.
Or just what's your position? Or you have another position that's even different than what everybody else has.
What are you thinking?
Tell us where you're at. What are you thinking? What's preventing you from speaking?
Right.
To try to give them that opportunity.
Yeah.
And usually they would come up with something. Every once in a while it was something insightful. They were like, oh no, we didn't think of that.
Well, and that's the value of it, right? But again, it can be hard for people to do in that kind of a setting if they, again, the story they tell themselves, I'm not one of the in crowd here. Or my viewpoint is so very different, they're going to laugh at me, or I'm going to sound like I don't know what I'm talking about, or what have you.
Sure.
Those are very real human things that happen. So we just go, I'm good.
I can appreciate that, and I totally agree with that. That is so hard for me to understand that another person would have that lack of confidence. But it's so difficult for me to understand.
And I think therein is part of the dynamic we're trying to solve here, right? Because when people meet someone like you who is as confident as you are and willing to try and experiment and all that kind of thing, and they're not, they feel oftentimes, not exclusively, but oftentimes the sense is one of inferiority. I'm not as good as he is. I'm not as smart as he is. I can't process as fast as he does. I can't hold my footing in this competition with that guy. So
it's funny. I have been told by an employee that I think too fast. Which I was like, you can speed yours up. Catch up.
I'm a big fan of brain research because we think people should be able to speed it up, but our wiring is just very, very differently.
Sure, they're just thinking different. Yeah. In this case, for her job, she just needs to speed it up. But that's, I guess, beside the point. Yeah. What experience is
better at.
What's that?
What does she need to get better at to elevate her confidence in order to speed it up? Right.
That's fair. That's conversation I've been having with her for a long time, months. Yeah. So
you value her, right?
I'm sorry?
You value her.
Totally. Absolutely. Oh. Yeah. If I didn't, she wouldn't be working for me.
Right.
That's how it works. Yeah, totally. So there's an investment in time.
Yes.
That's worth taking from my point of view. Yeah. And arguably, you could totally argue risk, because when I'm presenting something to an employee like that, where I'm asking for them to improve, there's some employees that just don't take that. They don't like that, and therefore they'll jump ship.
Right.
Because they don't feel like they need to improve, or they don't like someone like me coming in and saying, look, you have to improve, that you're not up to par.
Right. And so then the question becomes, how hard do you push that, right, to weed out people who simply will not ever, and how fast is fast to potentially lose someone that really is quality?
Yeah, there's always the reining in that I have to take of because there's a laundry list of stuff that you want to fix with your employees at any given moment, right? Some is a big deal, some is not a big deal. You got to figure out, okay, what's worth the battle.
Yep.
And maybe battle's the wrong word, but
I think that's true. And then what resources do we have to allocate to this versus all of the other things we have to allocate resources to?
right. But then you bring up the culture of the business where you can have other employees helping to get each other up to speed and up to par. So there's some, it's less competitive and more cooperative in that case. So
Yes.
that takes some time to form that culture, but yeah, it's been for most employee or every employee that's worth keeping. I feel it's worth the investment.
Absolutely.
And I'm no problem pushing them because in the end, if they can't take the push, that means either they're not willing to improve or they don't believe that they can improve or they're just not a good fit. Like even if they can improve, but they feel like they can't with my guidance,
Yeah.
then it's not going to be a good fit because one of them is going and I'm the owner of the business. So unless they're going to buy the company, which would be totally cool.
Yeah, that's funny. Yeah, you get to make the rules. We sometimes lose sight of the fact that we're all human beings and there are chapters that we each confront in the course of our lives unfolding that sometimes make us just unable to learn in a given moment or period.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And that is part of the whole dynamic.
Yeah.
But to your point, you run the business, you get to make the rules.
Yeah, in the end, it's not a democracy. It can't be. That's not. There's a reason that governments are democracies. Businesses, generally speaking, are not. Or at least you don't have the entire lot of people voting on something because they don't have all the information because we expect them to do their job.
Precisely.
So that's just the way of it, right? So, Susan, holy cow, we ran through so much time. How can people find your books?
A number of ways, probably the quickest and easiest, susanamarshall.com. We are in a transition mode here.
All right.
Institute to Susan A. Marshall, because I really believe that this book is going to touch a lot of people as baby boomers continue to age, as we are more and more called upon to deal with aging parents and even family members with extended illnesses. So Susan A. Marshall, if you go to that website, you'll find all the books, and at the very bottom right corner, you'll find a link to Backbone Institute, which will take you to all of those resources that have been built up over many years. Podcasts, videos, and articles, and books, and all kinds of stuff.
Sure, very cool. What do you see for the future, I guess, with your business? Will you be pushing more towards the Backbone Institute or more towards Susan Marshall?
Ask me in 6 months. What I'm finding that's really been interesting, and I have not been a goal setter planner type person. Peter Platt is one of my favorite authors. He wrote a book called The Answer to How is Yes. And I literally lived my life that way. I'm opportunistic, strategic, yes, in the sense that you can cut through things you know are noisy and they're going to be a waste of your time and energy. But what I find interesting is as we're working on building out the Susan A. Marshall website and the author and all of that kind of thing, that is coincidentally and simultaneously creating more opportunities for Backbone Institute. So what I'm beginning to draw from that is when you have a voice, when you are unapologetic but humble in what you offer and how you can help people, that attracts others. I don't
totally
have assessments and tools and all those kinds of things, but I certainly know a lot of providers who do. And if that's a wonderful base to start from, that's great. This whole, COVID world and all these Zoom meetings, people are zoomed out. I think the pendulum is going to swing. Who knows when? But
how so?
A lot of people who said technology is here to stay. We're never going to get back together in big groups again. I'm not.
Never? Well, I don't know about that. No. We are social creatures, man. So, and I can tell you from a guy that just went to a motorcycle gathering, social gatherings are happening.
Yes, overtly or covertly. So back to where they get the book, susanamarshall.com, of course, barnesandnoble.com, amazon.com, the providers of books. So, and in fact, all 4 of the books can be found on my website and Backbone Institute website and on Amazon.
Gotcha. So tell me again your website, the Backbone Institute, is that right?
Backbone Institute, LLC.
Okay.
SusanAMarshall.com.
SusanAMarshall.com. Awesome. Thank you so much for being on the show today, Susan. I feel like we could talk for another few hours. So I'll have to get you back on the show if you're cool with that.
I would love to do that. Yeah, it's been a lot of fun. Thanks for having me, and good luck to you.
Oh, yeah, thanks. We'll make, I feel like we're in the same circle here, just doing what we can to make the world a better place. So
Absolutely.
do what we can, right? This has been Authentic Business Adventures, the business program that brings the struggle stories and triumph and successes of business owners across the land, coming to you remotely and through the Sun Prairie Community Studios, underwritten by Bank of Sun Prairie. My name is James Kademan, and Authentic Business Adventures is brought to you by Calls on Call, offering call answering services for businesses anywhere, right? Across the country. All the ones that are terrible at answering their phone. On the web at callsoncall.com, as well as Draw In Customers Business Coaching, offering business coaching services for entrepreneurs in all stages of their business, on the web at drawincustomers.com. And of course, the Bold Business Book, a book for the entrepreneur in all of us, available on Amazon and wherever fine books are sold. We'd like to thank you, our wonderful listeners, as well as our guest, Susan Marshall. Susan, thank you so much for being on the show.
Absolutely enjoyed, Jane. Thanks you.
This has been super cool. Find us airing on 103.5 Wednesdays at 1 p.m., Sundays at 2 p.m. That's in the Sun Prairie area. If this is national, the internet's got you covered here at sunprairiemediacenter.com. Past episodes can be found morning, noon, and night at the podcast link found at drawincustomers.com. Thank you for listening. We will see you next week. I want you to stay awesome. And if you do nothing else, enjoy your business.